Tansei, Dr. Rebecca Major. I am an Indigenous scholar that is both Métis and Elnu. My mother, who is Métis, is the first generation to be raised outside of our community, and on my dad's side, being Elnu, I am the first one to be raised outside my community. However, my dad's mom, my mamere, was the last Elnu speaker in our family. So for these reasons, and understanding how legislation and identity forms people's sense of self, I've done a lot of academic work in this area. So today I'm going to talk about how the Hudson Bay and the fur trade impact Indigenous identity in Canada. So the fur trade history in Canada plays a role in the Métis ethnogenesis. Okay, so contact with the Europeans began with fishing on the East Coast in the late 15th century, followed by explorers and missionaries. Important to the story of contact of interaction, though, includes the interactions through the fur trade. The fur trade was largely dominated by the Hudson Bay Company for almost 200 years, and the company began with a royal charter issued by King Charles I of England, May 2nd, 1670. So the charter gave the Hudson Bay the trading monopoly in present-day Canada, and through the charter, they were responsible for governance and relationship building in the territory of Rupert's Land. Now, Rupert's Land made up much of central Canada, loosely west of Labrador to the foothills of the Rockies, and to the north encompassing James Bay. The Hudson Bay Company established fur trade posts known as forts and factories, and each post had either a chief trader or a chief factor. At these posts, despite company law, many European men took country wives, and some of the women that married came from what was known as Homeguard Indians. So when a fur trade post was established on the land, often there were Indigenous groups that frequented the post and would reside close by and act as middle people between them and other Indigenous groups. And so those people became to be known as Homeguard Indians. Now, these populations lived near the trading posts. And for example, one group that was well known for being Homeguard Indians were groups of Cree people, the Nehewin, because they would travel vast territory to meet between Indigenous groups and the fur traders. And because of the start of competition with the fur trade posts and starting of new trading companies such as the Northwest Company, the Hudson Bay Company found themselves actually having to establish themselves as inland posts. And so one of the furthest inland posts first established is actually the Cumberland House trading post. And so these inland posts developed as a result of competition, and also at the same time they started to loosen the rules on the intermarriage with Indigenous women, because the fur trade companies that were not Hudson Bay Company actually encourage intermarriage and starting families. So because of fur traders marrying Indigenous women and starting families, the company decided to establish a retirement community where the traders could stay in the country after their contracts were done and keep their country wives. So when someone worked for the Hudson Bay, they came to North America under a contract that would be for a set amount of time, say 5 or 7 years. Then they would return to England to receive their pay. There was a running tab kept while they were in North America for things like blankets, bags of flour, and these things would be deducted at their time of pay. So what men would do is they would turn off their country wives, which often meant they were giving her to someone else, and they would return home to Great Britain. So right now I say Great Britain rather than England, because at this point many of the traders were not English, but were rather Scottish or Welsh, or from other parts of the British Isles like the Orkney Islands. It was Orkney descendant fur trade settlers, coincidentally, that were part of the establishment of present-day Prince Albert, for example. So the company was finding that men were forfeiting their pay to stay in the country with their wives and their children, and they'd often run off with them. And as a result, the company started a retirement community in Red River under Lord Selkirk in 1812. So this was not just for the retired Hudson Bay employees and their families. So this colony was also created as a place for displaced Highland Scots. So the company felt they needed to keep an eye on them, as they were experienced traders and they didn't want them to be their own competition. So by creating this retirement settlement, it was a way for them to keep tabs on what people were doing. And this is important because of the high amount of trade competition that was happening, despite the fact that there was a monopoly granted through the charter. So with the establishment of the Red River colony, The company started issuing policies of conduct on the land and expected those policies and rules to apply to the Indigenous population, including the mixed population that was the result of the fur trade intermarriages. The first harsh policies began under Governor MacDonald's edict, which was forbidding trading outside the region and banning buffalo hunting in the area. So in the settlement, there was food and supply shortages for the settlers, so this was creating the reason for the ban. But the Métis traders were the provisioners of pemmican and other food supplies, so they continued to hunt despite the ordinances. So due to the food supply shortages, there was two pemmican proclamations that were made in 1814 and 1815 by Governor MacDonald, declaring that it was forbidden to export pemmican to other food suppliers outside the colony, and set in motion economic attacks that angered Métis people and saw this as an assault on their independent way of life. So eventually MacDonald was replaced by Governor Semple, who attempted to ban Métis hunting from around the Red River settlement. The Métis and Northwest Coalition was the first outward Métis organized collective based on identity that openly challenged institutional constraints in the area. So they formed a collective to actively engage the policies that were being raised against them. The Hudson Bay directives, combined with immense competition between the two companies, led to the Battle of Seven Oaks and the death of Semple. So during this time and before Semple's death, the Northwest Company formed a coalition with Métis people as a reaction to the Hudson Bay's control over the activities in the area. And the Northwest Company and Hudson Bay rivalry contributed to the Métis coalescing as an independent Indigenous group under the leadership of Cuthbert Grant. So the merger between the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company in 1821 re-solidified the monopoly for Hudson Bay that controlled the local economy through company policies, although there was a growing number of free traders who were also working in the area. So through the initial charter granting the monopoly, the Crown provided the newly merged company with the power to enact laws and enforce laws and policies on Rupert's Land. Métis people refused to acknowledge the Hudson Bay's monopolies and laws and to operate as free traders, or also known as freemen. So the free traders worked independently from the Hudson Bay Company and outside the jurisdiction and control of Red River, which resulted in the trial of Guillaume Sayer and other free traders in 1849. So during the mid-1830s, the company made administrative moves against Métis people through policies, and the Métis people responded by creating community councils and engaging the Hudson Bay Company diplomatically. The diplomatic governance structure of the Métis people was the exact result of these colonial enterprises attempting to interfere in Indigenous livelihood. So through the 1830s and 40s, Métis people continued to engage the Hudson Bay diplomatically, but also continued to act as the free traders. Now charged with illegally trading furs and acting outside the declared ordinances of the Council of Assiniboia, Pierre Guillaume Sayer, Andre Goulet, Hector McGuinness, and Norbert Laronde were brought before the General Quarterly Court of Assiniboia at Fort Garry in 1849. Now, although Sayer was found guilty, he received mercy as the court ruled that he believed he himself was outside the Hudson Bay jurisdiction. The case against the other three men was dismissed, and the decision resulting from the Sayer trial became historically significant for Métis, particularly the memories of the crowd chanting, "Le commerce est libre, vive la liberté." So upon the Hudson Bay's unsuccessful attempt to prosecute the free traders, the Council of Assiniboia was restructured as a colonial administrative structure to manage the colony. The council introduced a law that Indigenous people were outside the jurisdiction of the council and were not on the same footing as British subjects. When the Hudson Bay no longer wanted to be the administrators of the colony, the West was opening for settlement, Métis people found themselves again resisting colonial systems once more, because after the Sayer trial, the colony became a democratized state under the Hudson Bay, and it decided it no longer wanted to be a governing structure, and thus wanted to return the land back to the British Crown. So the Hudson Bay land transfer, it became a new era in the territory, and they were looking to shift control to Crown governance. And this is when the people realized that the territory was about to change hands without consultation. So the Métis once again organized to take political action and continue using diplomatic traditions and administrative apparatuses to assert these claims. So what began as a commercial enterprise by the Crown, the fur trade, led to the ethnogenesis of Indigenous people in Canada who were nation builders and responsible for the creation of the province of Manitoba in the Manitoba Act of 1870. That is the culmination of the Hudson Bay Deed of Surrender for the British Crown to take control of Rupert's Land.